the Saints have a starting quarterback. Derek Carr is now coming to New Orleans to start for the team. So that is finally a story that is put to bed a little bit, but actually it's not, because it's just getting out of bed and we're just getting started on breaking all that down. So we have everything on that situation today. And if you want to read about this, you want to hear more about it, you want to read about the other members of the Saints, because at some point we're going to start talking about the other guys on the team too, check out NewOrleans.Football/subscribe, 20% off first payment with the code CAR. We got a lot of stuff up there. We're breaking down the play-by-play of how this came together, how they pursued him, how they got him. We got everything from the combine, everything we heard whispered there. What are they going to do with defensive tackles? The door's still open on Mike Thomas. We got another podcast up there just breaking everything down that we heard out there. So make sure you check that out. If you aren't on the site, today feels like a good day to get that done. So check that out, NewOrleans.Football/subscribe. Use the code CAR, CARR, 20% off the first payment. And we're going to get into a lot of those topics today on today's podcast, which is coming to you from the Better Call BADEAUX podcast studio. And we are presented by Hardhide Ponchatoula Strawberry Whiskey. That is an 86 proof blend of wheat bourbon, American light whiskey, and fresh Ponchatoula strawberries. It is not for the thin-skinned, and it is blended in New Orleans. So make sure you look for it in your local bars, restaurants, and stores. Can't miss it. Red bottle, got the gator on there. Stands out. As soon as you walk in the door, you can't miss it. Was in the front of store at Walmart recently. So make sure you check them out. And if you need legal help with any of the following: car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, Maritime and Jones Act, hurricane and storm claims, you better call BADEAUX at 504-323-7777 or 985-303-7777 for your free consultation and case review. Make sure you check out our friends, Firehouse Subs, Veteran Boulevard location. Pull your car up there, get a sub, eat it, listen to this podcast, read about Carr on NewOrleans.Football, whatever you got to do, support them. They do a lot to support the city. And last but not least, if you are an elite member of NewOrleans.Football, keep your eyes on your inbox. Sometime in the next week, we're going to start putting together the RSVP for our pre-draft gathering. That is for the elite members on the site. If you aren't yet an elite member, you can upgrade, do that, get in there. You can come. Me, Mike, all the guys from the team will be out there doing a little meet and greet, doing a Q&A, all that stuff. So it'll be a good time. So make sure you check that out. All right, let's get into the show. All right, Carr.Football and NewOrleans.Football have finally merged as one and become one and the same thing. The Carr Watch is over, but now the Carr Watch actually gets going after the team.
Is that Carr.Football? You can actually, did you get the, we've had a lot of time to do this. Did you get the rights? Did you get the rights to Carr.Football? It'll take you straight to New Orleans.
Before I publish this, I think I will. And maybe there'll be like a special code tied to it or something if I can figure it out. I don't know. But yeah, no, they finally got their quarterback. It was like a month-long pursuit. They were patient. They played the market, and they ultimately got him. What does this mean, just overall? What's your very first thought? You see, the information come across. What was the first thought that kind of struck you with it?
Well, we've had a lot of time to talk ourselves into this. So if this comes out of the blue, the first day Carr is available, I think we do the hemming and the hawing and the plus minus, but I think we've gotten through all that. And I think we're both on the same page that this is just a huge win for the organization. First of all, he picked them.
Yeah.
There are reasons, he wasn't everybody's first choice. Looks like Carolina wants to trade up. Looks like the Jets want Rodgers. But that's meaningful. It's the first place he took a visit. It's where he came. It's where he identified that he thinks he can win the NFC South. The guy had choices. Okay, so you want to maybe make your list and rank him the 15th best quarterback in the NFL or the 12th best quarterback in the NFL, and you wish you could aim higher? Well, free agents like this don't come available very often. You can count on one hand. It happened with Kirk Cousins a few years ago, Teddy Bridgewater, Nick Foles. Free agents this high don't come available that often. And he picked the Saints, and he's a guy who obviously took his time because this is where he wants to finish his career and finally win some playoff games, and he thinks he can do it here. This is just, I think it's a real boon for the organization. They decided the only alternative is, the people want them to completely strip it down and rebuild. We know that's not what they want to do. They think they have a good roster that should be able to win the NFC South. They decided to be aggressive, and this helps them be aggressive. They would have been in limbo without him.
Yeah, I think the main thing to kind of say before everything is that he, as we've been saying since day one of this pursuit, he is not a savior of the organization.
Right.
He is not Patrick Mahomes. He's not a guy that you put on the team and say, well, off they go to the Super Bowl. They're a team now that can get into the playoffs, and then in a weak NFC, who knows what happens after that?
Should get into
that's
the playoffs.
kind of.
I should have said. You said what's my first reaction? My first reaction is they are the clear front runner in the NFC South.
Yeah, they're winning the NFC South. I think you go to BetMGM and you place that bet right now, and off you go. I mean, I think that's kind of how you should view it. And look, if they don't win the South now, barring something crazy happening, no one's getting Lamar Jackson. I mean, I can't see him leaving, but barring something crazy happening, if they don't win the NFC South, they have failed now. Now there are real expectations. And the people that I think are upset about mediocrity and everything else, like, there is now an expectation for them to be better than mediocre. Like, they need to win 10 games. Like, they need to get into the playoffs and be competitive in their first playoff game. They can't be subpar again next season. So DA got his quarterback. He got his coaches. He is set up now to where there's nothing else. There's nothing else to say. It's your medical staff. It's all this stuff. So the pieces are in place now for you to succeed. These are kind of your handpicked guys to some degree. Granted, this is the only quarterback that was available, but they got to win now. And I think that changes the expectation of the whole franchise. And for everybody that's upset about, well, why are they doing? They're going to be mediocre. If they're mediocre, they have failed. Yeah,
you'll get, it's a win-win for the Saints fan base, because I think the fans either want them to win or they want them to tear it down and rebuild. Well, now you're getting one or the other, because we think there's a chance for them to win. And not going overboard here. I mean, I think the model here, the greatest model, there's some Stafford comparisons being thrown around, but not that he'll lead the Saints to a Super Bowl, but that this is a guy who maybe because of situation can still play his best football in his second decade instead of his first. But I think the real model here is the Vikings and Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins hasn't turned them into the best team in the league, but he's turned them into a relevant team. They've had a shot. They've been in the mix every year and had a real shot a couple of times. But if for some reason it's a disaster and then Derek Carr doesn't work out and you're moving on from him, and by then Cam Jordan and Demario Davis and Tyrann Mathieu and Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas are all done, then you get the rebuild that you want. You get the tear it down and rebuild that you wanted, because the Saints will have no other choice. So this is probably the right time for this. The one thing I don't think anybody wanted the Saints to be was in no man's land, and they didn't want to be there either. So now they are in we're putting all our resources into it, and cool, go for it. Because if it doesn't work, then you can be the tear it down and rebuild team.
The thing I think I like most about it, just from a macro standpoint, from a team building perspective, is that I think when you have some type of quarterback that you're good with, you don't get forced into decisions. And I think teams that don't have a quarterback end up getting forced into really bad decisions. And that can even be in the draft. Like, I know everybody dreams about the top 5, and the top 5 is the best way to get your franchise changing quarterback. This isn't an argument against that. Right. If you told me Saints can have a top 5 pick or Derek Carr, I'm taking the top 5 pick and I'm gambling every single time, because the upside of that is so much higher than what you have over here. But I think what happens is when you don't have a Derek Carr or somebody else on your team, or Kirk Cousins or whoever, yeah, granted, you might not find your way out of that, but you don't get forced into this, well, man, we just won 6 games and now we're picking 5th in the draft and we have to take a quarterback because we don't have one. We have to take a quarterback. I mean, I think that's how you start talking yourself into drafting Zach Wilson or someone else. It's sort of like when you watch like House Hunters, the very first scene is like, we got to have a pool. We got to have 4 rooms. We need a 2-car garage. We need a fence that faces south because we like the sun to raise over here. And then by the end, like, they're in the wrong part of town. They're a bedroom short. There's no pool and there's no yard at all. And, it's just kind of like, well, they have to live somewhere. So we have to make these compromises. I think when you have Derek Carr or you have Alex Smith, what you do in the draft quarterback wise can be a little bit more targeted. Now, granted, you probably can't target one of the top 2 or 3 guys, but you'd rather be trading up for Patrick Mahomes because you just won 12 games and you like him instead of, we just lost Tom Brady and we have to trade up to 10 to get Mac Jones because we don't have anybody.
Well, look, and even if it's not a bad decision, quarterbacks cost a fortune. So you trade multiple first-round picks to go up and get one, or you take a guy at a 3rd-round grade on and you talk yourself into him at 29, or you trade for somebody else's quarterback. I mean, we've seen the teams, Carolina, who was in this mix. We saw them sign Teddy Bridgewater to a ton of money. Then we saw them trade for Sam Darnold. Then we saw them trade for Baker Mayfield. Now we're probably going to see them try the tank model and trade up for one. That's what your franchise becomes if you don't have a quarterback. You become a franchise looking for a quarterback. The Saints don't have to be that franchise right now.
Well, look,
now
it's better
they can
to
be a franchise looking for a defensive tackle, a running back, and a receiver.
Yeah, it's better to be the Saints right now, the team that beat out the other team that's picked in the top 5 twice recently and then went for Derek Carr and missed. Look, they might get Aaron Rodgers. They get Aaron Rodgers. They're probably in a better position for where they're at right now, regardless. But still, I mean, that's just kind of the juxtaposition is very, very obvious. There is not a good solution to this problem. And again, not a savior, but you don't have a problem right now.
Right.
You don't have a problem. And you solve the problem. Maybe you can solve some other stuff when you get there. Like the Saints and the Jets are almost the same team, except one is older. Like if you just kind of take off the average age of the roster, it's top 10 defense, solid running back, good wide receivers, no quarterback. Same team, both sides.
Right.
Like both teams felt like they were a quarterback away. It's tough. If you don't solve that problem, the Jets aren't going to make the playoffs. Their coach probably gets fired, and there they go. So
well, the difference to me between the Saints and Jets is I think the Jets are built up more long term.
Yeah, no doubt.
The Saints are more win now.
No doubt.
But the Saints are more win now. Like if this was somehow a 1-year deal, 2023. He should hit the ground running with this team, and then they can figure out, what they become from there. If they go 2 rounds into the playoffs, or even better this year, then they can decide, what's their next move. But
no doubt, I would trade the Saints roster for the Jets right now. They're on the come up, and the Saints are kind of like
it's like the 2017 Saints.
Yeah, I mean, but if you just take out the average age of the roster and you lay it out, it's very, very similar. There are a lot of teams I feel like they're a quarterback away, and the Jets more than anybody knows how hard it is to get to that position. I'm a little bit surprised that they. And look, I mean, they changed their administration so much that the suffering of the franchise probably doesn't weigh down on everybody the same way. But for them to kind of play this away, like if they don't get Rodgers right now, that team is they've had a disastrous offseason.
Yeah, I think Garoppolo becomes their plan C, because the Jets are absolutely unequivocally in. It reminds me of like a fantasy draft where you're like looking at your roster and you're like, when my turn comes up again, I'm taking the top quarterback on my board. It's what my team needs. So they're going to go from Rodgers. They were hoping to maybe keep Carr on the hook longer, I assume. Garoppolo, but like they need a quarterback. The Saints, on the other hand, though, they're sort of in that mode. I think they might have turned their attention to Garoppolo too, but from the reporting we've done, they would have maybe reluctantly talked themselves into Garoppolo at the right price. They didn't just take Carr because he was the best guy available. They really like Carr, they really like the fit. Yeah, I mean, DA drafted him, but also they watched him do his best work in John Gruden's offense, which is so similar to the Saints offense. They want the quarterback who can go up to the line of scrimmage, who, Pete Carmichael, terrific story that Nick has online now, including all the behind-the-scenes details about their wooing, what they sold him on, what Carr liked, what they liked about Carr. But him and Pete Carmichael really hit it off because that's what Pete Carmichael likes to do. Give the guy 2 or sometimes 3 plays at the line of scrimmage. Let him make choices. Let him be a leader. And they see him as a guy that can do that. Nobody's ever questioned his decision-making, intelligence, things like that. Sometimes, things don't always work out well when he's under pressure and everything, but they love what he brings to the line of scrimmage. They're really excited about him being the kind of guy who can run the kind of offense they want to run. They see a real fit here.
Yeah. As we said last week, like this offense is an offense that needs a quarterback to make it go. He's probably somebody that can kind of make it go a little bit. It's not going to be Drew Brees, obviously. There is a limit to what he can do, but I think that the fit is there, given what you said about the Gruden stuff. If you want to read that story, NewOrleans.Football/subscribe. Use the code CAR, 20% off. The inside look, play-by-play from the first meeting to the signing. All the details, how it happened, how they recruited him, what Carr was thinking, what the Saints were thinking. Just a little bit of an inside look there, and we'll have a ton more stuff on him and the Saints and everything else. All right, looking forward.
And that's what looking forward is one of the pluses. I was going to squeeze this in. I thought you were finishing. The podcast. And I was going to say real quick, what this allows them to do now is, all right, now the rest of this offseason, that first round pick they got, if they have any money left in free agency, now it's filling the other need.
Yeah, looking forward. Okay, so What is offensively? What's your first move? What's the first thing you're doing? Car's in the bag now. You're going to free agency. What are you weighing? What's your top priority in free agency, and what's your top priority in the draft?
Yeah, you said first move. Running back isn't my first move because I want to do running back in the draft.
Agreed.
But running back is my top priority. That's the most important thing they can add to this offense. They're going to add a running back to this offense. No bones about it. They want a young guy who can play a big role alongside Alvin Kamara and then theoretically replace Alvin Kamara in the coming years. And so I think you do that in the draft. You can do that in round 2 or 3 of the draft, though. You don't have to do it in round 1. You could do it in round 1, though. Or maybe if something shakes out of value in free agency. I've wondered about like Alexander Madison. Will he be cheap? We're already seeing a lot of guys getting franchised. I don't know if the right fit exists in free agency, but maybe it does. You're adding that. The other one is the possession receiver, the guy who can get it. This might make Michael Thomas take a cheaper deal that's heavily incentive-based because he kind of likes this idea. If it's not Michael Thomas, it's someone like Michael Thomas, and I think that is a need you probably fill in free agency. I don't think you can count on getting your go-to guy that you trust on every 3rd and 5 and in the red zone in the draft. I think it doesn't have to be a number 1 receiver, but you want a guy who can win a contested catch battle in free agency.
I absolutely hate myself for the next sentence I'm about to say, but Mike Thomas has been liking posts about Derek Carr throughout this process, and Mike that's how you kind of know what Mike's thinking. Mike kind of communicates through his social media a little bit. He hates me right now. He likes Derek Carr. I mean, that's just kind of what it is. And look, on the Mike Thomas thing, I'll eat it right here. Like, we were probably a little bit premature on declaring his demise. I don't know necessarily that he's all the way coming back, but he might return to the Saints. The door is open there. And I think it was kind of the way it was interpreted, it was hard not to interpret it that way. The contract is designed to explode. Like, so when they did that, the first thought is kind of like, oh, well, they're moving on for Mike. Well, yeah,
like you said, the NFLPA even interpreted it the same way and said contract restructured to
facilitate release.
Yeah, to facilitate players' release. So basically, if we did get it wrong, the interpretation is they killed the last contract.
Well, yeah, the contract was designed to explode.
Now dead.
Yeah, the contract was redone to end the contract, to make him a free agent.
So he's basically a free agent.
He is a free agent. Our thought process was kind of, and more so my thought process was more so, well, if they weren't going to keep him,
why do that?
Yeah, why do that? So it was maybe a misstep in the analysis that the door is still open for him to return. I guess the door was always open for him to return on a cheap deal, but he's not coming back on that other one. But look, my take on Mike Thomas from day 1 of training camp last year to now has been the same. I think he can come back from this. I think he can be good again. I saw Mike's talent. I believe in Mike's competitiveness. I thought he was on that track last year. I think he can still get there. Practically speaking, though, if you bring Mike back, I still want to see them add another receiver and or tight end. Like, just being fair to the situation, he has missed a lot of time the last few years. And I think putting all your eggs in that basket with a quarterback who isn't very good historically in the red zone as is a very big gamble. So I think I would bring Mike back, and I would bring in a young player behind him. That's the way I do it. They use everybody. They got enough personnel groupings. There's enough meat on the bone. That's how I would go about it.
Everything we've seen or heard from the Saints, from sources, is pretty obvious if you just look at the team. They're not desperate for a high volume of pass catchers like they were 2 years ago when they had like no real professional pass catchers on their roster. They love Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave. I said those in the wrong order. Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed.
Bayou Bomb Squad.
And they like Juwan Johnson, but they clearly have made it clear that they want the guy who can catch it in traffic, who can catch it on 3rd and 5, who they can throw a slant to on 3rd and 2, who can catch it in the red zone. That's where they feel, possession receivers, and that could come in a couple of forms. They definitely want the big contested catch guy. Maybe they want the slot receiver too. But it doesn't have to be they need to be the ones going out here and signing someone to a Christian Kirk deal in free agency this year.
Their next move, too, the very next thing they do, and they probably got to wait till the league year starts to make it a June 1st cut, but in fairness to Jameis Winston, they need to get him out of here as soon as they can to allow him to go out and explore his market. I don't know if you're allowed to let people go out and start talking to people now. Like, I would allow him to do that now, just out of fairness to him. Like, let him get out there, do his thing. It didn't work out here. It's not his fault. Let him have what Carson Wentz is doing right now. I don't know the actual role on that because he probably is going to be June 1st. But if there's a way, if he isn't a June 1st cut, like call him today and let him go and let him test his market. Like just let him move on and find the best
Give
option
him
for
permission
himself.
to do that. Yeah, absolutely. And look, we've said this a million times. I mean, I don't know when will be the right time to revisit Jameis Winston. Maybe when he picks his new team, we'll talk about him a little bit more. I understand why the Saints are moving on, but I'm still not ready to close the book. Like I think I've said it a few times this week. Like I see a Geno Smith season in Jameis Winston's future. I think it's still possible for him.
I want to see it, man.
And it's a shame. The injuries were the biggest shame of the last 2 years because we never got to see it for sure.
He's a nice person. You cheer for him. He makes you like him. I hope the best for him. I think it's still out there. I hope he figures it out. I hope he gets in the right situation. I hope somebody gives him the runway to run an offense, let it form around him, to make mistakes, grow, correct them, get better, do all that stuff. Best of luck to Jameis, man. I hope it works out for him.
And then, obviously, in the same breath, I think the Saints are going to strongly pursue Andy Dalton to stay. I think they're going to hope Andy Dalton likes the fit here, likes where his family lives, and wants to be, he's probably not getting starting opportunities. The question for Andy Dalton is, do you want to be Derek Carr's backup, or would you rather be a rookie's backup, or somebody whose job is in jeopardy's backup, or an injury, Teddy Bridgewater took that backup job behind Tua last year. Is that what Andy Dalton's looking for? So he can, have the best chance to get on the field right away. But, we've said a million times, Andy Dalton actually exceeded expectations last year. That doesn't mean he was the right guy, but he was one of the best backup options you could have in the NFL, and they would like to keep him as that.
Look, honestly, I think he could probably hang out here for a long time and kind of be the backup, be a McCown type, probably be one of the higher paid backups in the league. Just hang out here until Carr's deal's done or you can't play anymore. One thing they really liked about him early in last season was just in the meeting room. Like they were using him because I guess he kind of has like a photogenic memory and he can remember a lot of stuff he did in great detail. And the recall was key in helping them kind of plan some stuff and take advantage of different looks and how a defense does a certain thing. And, just watching film of the upcoming opponent, they would come to him and he would have a lot of input in those meetings. Like I see Andy Dalton possibly being a coach at some point post-career. And you can kind of, with a veteran quarterback, I think you can kind of settle into some of that and kind of be that resource and feel like you're putting your stamp on the game. And that was one of the things he really liked about backing up Jameis, is that even though he wasn't playing, he felt like he was still contributing positively towards them winning. So in this structure, being a backup, having that conversation, having the coaches come to you for your thoughts on that, I think it's an advantageous spot for him. So yeah, I agree. I think he's probably going to want to stay here. All things being equal, money being equal, someone isn't signing him to be a starter, but all backup situations and cash being equal, I don't see why he would be in a hurry to leave here.
And then in theory, I would have, if the Saints didn't get Derek Carr, I was going to start wearing a Hendon Hooker jersey in here. Because I would have, because then if you are signing Andy Dalton to be your starter, or even if you're signing Jimmy Garoppolo to be your starter, it would be all about, well, who's the next guy? Who's the next guy? Who's the next guy? And I actually like Hooker and think there's going to be great value in him because I think his age and his injury are knocking him out of the first round and maybe deep into the second round, into the third round. So I don't know if you close that off. Like if he's available at 71, I should still love him as much as it. Maybe I don't like him at 40 anymore.
I think this goes to my earlier point that you don't get forced into decisions now.
But you can still do it.
So if you love Hendon Hooker, you draft Hendon Hooker. But if you don't love Hendon Hooker, you might end up drafting Hendon Hooker because you don't have a starting quarterback. And I think that's how these big mistakes are being made. Yeah, it spots of value. I think even in the middle of the rounds, though, like I think it's still everything we've said before. And I think one thing that like all the people that are arguing, like, hey, like we can stop being extreme about every single opinion on everything in human history. Like it can be okay to have nuance to an opinion. And the thing here is that having Derek Carr doesn't stop you from ever drafting a quarterback. You can have Derek Carr and you can draft a quarterback and you can do both things. Yeah, it probably stops you from having the top 5 pick. And again, I sympathize with everyone who wants that because that is your best shot of having the franchise-changing quarterback.
Caleb Williams is not coming to the Saints now officially.
I don't think having Derek Carr stops them from saying, okay, we like this quarterback, we're going to go get him. And I think even going through this stretch right here, the 2 years post-Breeze, and I think they tried really hard to replace Breeze. Like really, if you look at it, in 2015, they swung the bat many times. They drafted a guy, they signed Jameis, they traded for Teddy Bridgewater. Like they got Taysom Hill and they tried to develop him, maybe there could have been a little bit more significant input of assets into that pursuit, but there wasn't. But still, I think going through that and then these 2 years and probably the panic they felt right now, because the difference between them and the Jets, Mickey Loomis ain't going anywhere. And they're going to remember how it felt and how helpless they felt without it. I think their pursuit of the next quarterback, I think it's going to be with a little bit more vigor behind it. And it should. Like, you went through this, you see it now.
Yeah.
I think you start, if it's not this draft, the next draft. Like, I think you start looking at it immediately like, all right, we got 3 years on this clock. Maybe we re-sign Derek. If we do, okay, you draft a quarterback, whatever. But like, I think you start looking at it right now. Like, you have to. Like, the next chapter starts right now. Like, you have to be looking at it.
Yeah, and just to finish off that point, I mean, when we've talked about this a million times, did the Saints screw up by not planning ahead? I don't think so. I think it's really hard if you're a team that is not picking in the top 10. I think the one guy they definitely missed on was Lamar. I mean, we go back to Mahomes in 17, but Drew is still kind of in his prime then. That was going to be about how special Mahomes was, not because that was the time you had to pick one. But Lamar Jackson was a screw up. They liked Lamar Jackson. He was available at 32. They screwed that up. There are not a lot of, it's hard to think they had a vision for Jalen Hurts, especially when they already had Taysom Hill here. The whole league was not agreed upon that Jalen Hurts was, but there's not this long list of guys that the Saints passed on this guy and the Saints passed on this guy and the Saints. You didn't pass on a lot of guys because where you're drafting, they weren't available. So
we're going to argue about this for about 7 hours on text tonight, but I would actually flip that. I think it would have been easier to replace Breeze in 17 because like that was coming off the season where they realized he couldn't throw the ball down the field anymore. And they changed the whole offense that offseason. I think after 17 and almost getting – I think that 17 team, they beat Minnesota. Like there's a really good chance they get to the Super Bowl. I think replacing Breeze in 18 would have been harder than – I almost give them more of a pass on like not being aggressive on Mahomes. And in 18, it's like, man, they're knocking on the door. Like it really felt like, all right, get a pass rusher and off they go. Either way, though, like it would have been tough to make that investment both times. It's just both times.
But I'm just talking about the concept of, I think people in their mind think that every year somebody finds a Dak, somebody finds a Russell Wilson, there isn't just a Jalen Hurts. There's just not a long list of guys that if you were picking 15th or later in the draft, you didn't miss on a lot of guys. Right. They just didn't. They didn't come into the league. They rarely do. So it's tough. So that's why you take the path the Saints have taken. That's why you tried Teddy Bridgewater.
Everybody was wrong.
Why you tried Jameis Winston.
Like, everybody was wrong on Jalen. Everybody was wrong on Dak.
Yeah.
Everybody was wrong on Zach Wilson. Everybody was wrong on Blake Bortles. Like there aren't a lot of things that happen where people are like, man, this is insane. Like what are they doing with this quarterback? Like nobody would have drafted him there. Most of them are like, oh okay, like this is where he should have went. Yeah. And that usually it's when someone's drafting like a Dak or something like, or whoever in the later rounds is like, wow, that was a reach. Like that's usually how people react to those. Like nobody knows at those moments. So,
but I guess to bring the whole point home, like I did a study a few years ago when it was clear they were going to replace Breeze. Is how did every team ever in history replace their Hall of Fame quarterback? And there is one Steve Young in there, and there is one Aaron Rodgers in there, and there are like basically no others that are anywhere near that category. Like you get to like Danny White and Jay Fiedler as being two of the most successful, Brad Johnson. So that makes this
Pat Mahomes.
They didn't replace a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Well, I mean, just the successor though, successor plan. That was
no,
one
but
of the
I'm
more
saying
successful.
like all the teams.
But just I mean, just successor plans in general though, like aren't.
So this
great.
is a good one. What I'm saying is that's why they should be very excited to get Derek Carr. Like not a lot of teams go from, 16 straight years of winning to getting a quarterback that can keep them winning. Like, I mean, it's not, these guys don't grow on trees.
Yeah. He's just got to keep them. He's got to keep them winning those games now. So, all right, they take care of the offense. Mike Thomas, maybe not comes back. Doors open there. I mean, I think the most pressing need on defense, obviously defensive tackle. They have to get a defensive tackle. Defensive end, I think is still a need. They still kind of view their options there positively. I think I'm a little bit more pessimistic about the DNs than I think the internal view of the team is.
I agree.
So I focus on that defensive line. And if you can bring Caden Ellis back, you do it. I would do it. Restructuring DeMario, I think, kind of closes the door on how far you're willing to invest. You aren't viewing him as the starter for this year anymore. I fear that they're going to regret it if he gets away.
Right.
But if you're Caden Ellis and someone's saying, hey, you can come here and be our starting linebacker, you go. Like, you have to go.
Well, especially if it's a 3-4 team where he's a starting outside linebacker who could potentially be
pass
getting
rush.
double-digit sacks for a team or whatever. But if he stays in New Orleans, I think that'll be a big part of his game too. That's how you get a third linebacker on the field. And, oh, by the way, they need more pressure coming off the edge.
Yeah.
So that could be a win-win there. But, yeah, defensive tackle is the one. And I think that becomes the position you're most likely to see them draft at 29 or 40 now, is helping that defensive line.
Yeah, it has to happen. It has to happen. All right, that's the Derek Carr report. We've kind of exhausted this topic over and over. We kind of got to start writing some stuff so a little bit shorter today on this podcast. We'll be back end of the week. Members only pod. Make sure you check that out. And again, use the code CAR to save 20% on your first payment at NewOrleans.Football. We got a ton of stories there, a ton more coming. Breaking all this down from every angle. Saints got a quarterback, and we'll be back next week.